Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Hyper-Converged infrastructure, fueling a hybrid cloud journey session. Thank you so much for having me here. Just to introduce myself, this is Shreri Dandapani. I work as an advisory system engineer for Dell Technologies under the vertical called Storage and Platform Solutions. For the next 25 minutes, what you're going to hear me speaking is about how successful are you in today's phase of cloud adoption. It's all about how soon that one wants to adopt or how late one has adopted. But let's take some statistical look or how successful are you as a customer hearing this session in the journey of cloud adoption. Now, 93% of customers are expected to deploy workloads minimum of 2 or more clouds. And interestingly, the statistics what's seen on your screen has a pattern of observations on why one wants to pursue after a cloud adoption, and more specifically, why one would want to pursue after a multi-cloud adoption. As you've seen in this slide, multi-cloud management is one of the most compelling factor on why one would want to move into a cloud adoption rate. And let's see a little more details on if you're one of the team member who are attending this session. Probably you're the one who's managing your application landscape, or probably you're part of an infrastructure managed services team, or probably one of the line of business. But the question what you see on the slide, if you have the pressure to innovate and adopt into a cloud and multi-cloud, I think you're just banging here on hearing out how you can adopt into cloud pace with the help of Dell Technologies and its portfolio. All to speak, just to bring in summary about what are the kind of options one as a customer can pursue after when there's a conversation of multi-cloud. And we call this as multi-cloud landscape. And what is natively available from the public cloud offerings such as hyperscalers from AWS to Azure to Google Cloud is all classified as public cloud. But if you are a customer who intends to move everything as a subscription as a service, or even everything as a service, that's recently been debated more than ever before. That's the as a subscription model. And on to the left, if you're one of the customer who wants to bring in both the worlds together, private on-prem cloud and a part of a public cloud, and that's what we call it as a hybrid cloud. And significantly, hybrid cloud gets experimented into 3 categories. That's the native private on-prem cloud. A portion of it is also extended on an edge cloud, which is a distributed premises. And a part of the services can be catered from one of the hyperscaler just because it is not primarily made available either in an on-prem cloud or an edge cloud. So as Dell Technologies and as a representative, I'm here to let you know the opportunities of adoption into cloud is no longer a destination, but rather we're starting to realize, get a sense of fact that cloud is just an operating model, how you intend to operate. But when I say operating model, there's another question that prompts me to kind of bring you into an inclination. What do we intend to operate? It's all about workload. Because as a customer, if you're here picking this invitation and attending a session, which means you're part and parcel of something so-called connected either to an aspect of cost, you are in a decision criteria of a cloud vision and a cloud strategy that you're trying to lay for your organization. Or on contrast, you're probably a part of a workload-centric organization where you're extremely concentrated about how do you operate this workload? How do you derive efficiency of the workload that you are probably running in, regardless of what infrastructure that's in today? There are 3 laws that justifies how workload needs to be embraced and how workload needs to be acknowledged. The laws of physics talks about what is the kind of performance that your workload requires and demands. A lot many times that we just close the conversation and shut off the booth when we say, this is my workload and I want it in so-and-so footprint or a landing zone. But we don't double click, or we fail to get into an aspect of conversation to know what is the demand of your workload, What is the level of I/O? What is the level of throughput? What is the disk latency that your workload might demand when your end users or end applications are kind of fetching it in? That's the laws of physics. And most important is the laws of economics, because ultimately your workload that runs on, regardless of what native platform or what native service that's adopted, but how much do you pay for that workload to eccentrically perform? The laws of economics talks about the cloud economics, that every terabyte, or it could be every core that's been built across, basis on a consumption model. Gone are those days where we've started seeing the dip of customers wanting to pay the capital expenditures on the higher side. But rather, these are the days that we are starting to see a flat curve where the customer wants to start in a stigma of economics and wants to flatten the curve of the economics across the period of support or across the period of contract. Because operational expenditures are justified, then capex being high. So those flat curves are the areas where laws of economics can speak about. And of course, laws of land matters the most. If you're one of the customers who's part of the hospital industry, HIPAA policy says that your native patient records needs to be locally made available, not on the cloud platform. RBI guidelines talks about, for all the BFSI customers, that most sensitive personas and data got to be natively residing in an on-prem cloud, not on a public cloud, taking consideration of the data sovereignty of the patients in hospital industry and in this case of banking. So what does it mean? Where do we drive our cloud adoption towards if there are three laws that will have to be governed to make the right choice where my workload needs to be governed? As it rightly says in the slide, it's not about either you land up in a public cloud or in a private cloud. Bringing both the worlds together of an on-prem cloud and a portion of it from a hyperscaler, and that's what, as Dell Technologies, we would love to present as a hybrid cloud. How do you fuel your adoption towards a hybrid cloud / multi-cloud? And we are highly dependent on the underlying bare metal architecture that governs and powers the hybrid cloud or multi-cloud journey that runs on a hyper-converged infrastructure as a platform. Before we get in there, a double click on the type of workloads. I've had multiple conversations with different CXOs who's extremely concerned about the existing workloads, a legacy application which they don't intend to retire. But of course, there are some very basic necessities to have those workloads not retired, continue to operate. Probably it's already given them the best of cost reduction justification. It's highly secured, tested and robust. The reliability factor on these applications that's probably running decades now is higher enough than governing into a Newton application. And the control, the span of control, what the organization has on these applications is something that they do not want to kind of discount it. But today, as we speak, the multi-billion cloud native applications as we speak are being built. The enormous tsunami of startups, you can name it, as it's involved in our day-to-day life, are the cloud native or containers that's hosted. How fast can you time to market? How fast can you penetrate from a developer's innovation that runs just on a testing bed and move it quickly into a production and push it down to market? What is the amount of infrastructure handling that you can give to a developer so that his innovation is not prohibited and there's no hindrance to it, but rather it's a scalable infrastructure as he continues to evolve his innovation on the product, on the portfolio that he builds on. And the kind of differentiation what every organization is a startup to a well-established enterprise organization or innovating, bringing out patents, has to be supported by an infrastructure that can feed the developer without any hindrance. So these two quadrants of legacy workload and a cloud native workload is something that either of you, a customer, would want to embrace it independently, but predominantly the industry is moving towards bringing a combination of both of it, not retiring the existing workloads, at the same time accommodating the new trend applications and a developer community. There are ways to address. Either you make a choice to modernize your entire data center and shift and lift, or rather lift and shift to move away from the existing way of operating your workload and completely monopolize into a cloud native adoption. Or as it says, you can always bring a hybrid infrastructure where an infrastructure can cater to the demand of accommodating both these workloads, again with both the landing zones of probably a private on-prem cloud and with some services coming from a hyperscaler, from a public cloud, a portion of that. If there are competencies that they are interested to go and refactor these applications, that not just it remains to be a legacy application, but can also be tweaked and optimized, it can be moved into a container, moving from just a normal virtual machine to a library that can run in a container. Ultimately, if you want to replace it all and then bring it as a subscription hosted by a software vendor, then you get rid of the application natively even to be hosted. These are the kind of parameters that one can consider on how to either independently accommodate these workloads or bring both these format of workloads together. While you do this, what we tend to forget, or as a consultant, we make a very cognitive call to talk to customers on multi-cloud sprawl. It's all about wanting to adopt, the pace to adopt. It's the race to adopt. No longer the conversation with the customers is about IT budget. I've had CIOs saying there are two formats of budget that's basically been cascaded on the table. The IT budget, and second is the cloud budget. So adoption towards cloud, as you saw the statistical records, it speaks about 93% of enterprise customers would have or landed in minimum 2 clouds adoption. But while you're taking a call, a step towards cloud adoption, as much as you have evaluated the type of workload that you want to sprawl across the cloud, but do we know what a multi-cloud sprawl can cost? And if we know, do we know how do we address it? And that's why here I am to introduce Dell Technologies Consistent Cloud that can prevent you from getting into the state of multi-cloud sprawl. Just a brief on what is multi-cloud sprawl. When adoption of multiple services coming from different hyperscalers connected to a probably your own core data center. For different reasons, probably you as an organization merged into a different acquisition that came from along with a public cloud offering, or probably you have parked a shadow IT of it running on services on a public cloud, or you wanted certain services very specifically to be made available and catered only by the public cloud hyperscaler vendor, or you wanted to isolate and mitigate risks. The difference between the workload that is tend to run close to your chest on a private cloud and certain workloads that you can afford to run on a public cloud could be one of these reasons and proximities that you intend to adopt more than one single public cloud. But what you ultimately land is there are silos of management overhead because you end up managing different complex cloud platforms. Migrations of workload is not a cakewalk, which means there are migration complexities when you intend to keep the data agnostic across the platform. There are complexities. While you adopt more of cloud, which means you need to expect your workforce also to be upskilled, and so is your processes and your internal compliance teams to adopt multiple cloud policies. And last but not the least, there could be definitely a bit of compromise from one vendor to another vendor on the security postures and compliance. Not ultimately all of them tacked together well along. So what do we end up seeing and identifying then? The consistency across these cloud platforms when you intend to move into a multi-cloud and hybrid cloud journey is a compromise that you as a customer take. But here we are as Dell Technologies, we cater to the demand to mitigate the risk of what cloud sprawl can take, moving your workload into a platform so-called consistent. How do we achieve it? We achieve it by bringing consistent operations across all the platform. We mitigate the management overhead we mitigate the silos of management platform across all the cloud platforms is because there are management operations that we very closely, jointly knitted together with VMware with a long-term partnership. Comes in as a centric interface for your cloud data to be accessed with one single interface, one single management to operate. The workload migrations are extremely taken into consideration, and there are tools that's made of ease for your workload to be either migrated on day one or your workload to sprawl across multiple platforms and multiple cloud spaces as well. And we would love to re-leverage your skills and processes that your organization has, which means we want to take it as hypervisor-centric conversation when you build a crowd sprawl so that your processes and skills are not challenged when you bring in more than one single cloud platform. And the security policies are definitely taken into consideration and associated that your compliance is not jeopardized, but the compliance policies are also stigmatic and stays consistent across. These are the 4 quadrants where we insist that a consistent hybrid or a multi-cloud can help you to mitigate the issues where generally you would have landed up without Dell Technologies Cloud as a platform. Like I said, the subject of workload or data or objects, name it in your own native language. It's a triangular story of where your data, objects, and workload can be placed and positioned across core to edge to cloud, which is your core private data center, and your edge, which is your distributed data cloud, and your public cloud, which is a hyperscaler. And all these 3 things gets pinned together with consistence. When I say consistence, it's a consistent infrastructure, extended to consistent operations, and consistent services. That's what Dell Technologies Cloud is all about. It's an eye chart, but it's categorically designed this way. Like I said, again, drawing your attention towards, if you're already getting your mindset into adoption towards multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, keeping workload as the centrifugal force, your underlying bare metal infrastructure. In the case of Dell Technologies, we are powered with hyper-converged infrastructure that fuels your vision towards adoption into a hybrid cloud. And that hyper-converged infrastructure has to lead the conversation with the maximum share of wallet within Dell Technologies for HCI comes from the product which is VxRail, definitely known to each one of you, longer in the market. And also we do support the other HCI topologies extended with PowerFlex, which is hypervisor agnostic. Or if you intend to have a converged infrastructure that's built on independent storage arrays and independent network and so is your compute platform, that's the VX block. Keeping the CI and HCI, converged infrastructure and hyper-converged infrastructure as the bare metal platform to fuel your adoption towards cloud, that's the layer so-called consistent infrastructure. And jointly built with VMware, VxRail tops the chart. We're making this entire synergy of services, operations, and infrastructure coming into one single pyramid. And you're going to see this pyramid chart in the next few slides. Over and above comes from the joint software engineering from VMware, who leads its space by bringing in all possible level of automations, orchestrations, visibility towards your workload, enabling policies to automate auto deployments, want to have it to be a modular architecture that they can auto scale, put in your level of governance on to see your consumption and usage, and nevertheless it doesn't stop you from bringing in a container workload as well jointly with the legacy applications that you can run. That's the key that comes from VMware's vRealize suite. We call it as VMware Cloud Foundation, which has got much more capability than just what VMware vRealize suite is capable of delivering. And last but not the least are the value-add services that comes from jointly built from Dell and VMware to automate your processes and bring in a lot of syntaxes that's converged for our auto provisioning stigma, and can also include the kind of type of containers that you want to orchestrate with the support of Kubernetes layer. That's what we call it as consistency across all the three layers of infrastructure, operations, and services. That's the Dell Technologies Cloud, which is the primary element built on the hyperconverged infrastructure that fuels your passion towards adopting into a multi-cloud adoption. This doesn't restrict, and all that I could convey in this part of the agenda is only tip of the iceberg. Feel free to connect with us. Just to let you know that we are extended to about 3,000 plus cloud partners to bring this consistency into a reality. 3,000 plus cloud partners who can pin down your vision of cloud adoption along with the hyper-converged offerings, hyper-converged infrastructure offerings that's natively delivered from Dell Technologies, that can pin down both the worlds coming together between your private cloud and a public cloud, extended to edge cloud as well. In summary, the operational hub for you to land a hybrid cloud journey lands and stands with Dell Technologies Cloud, where your data is made available natively on a private on-prem cloud that's primarily recommended and consulted to be built on hyper-converged infrastructure, tops the chart with VxRail, and along with it with Powerfly and Azure Stack. If you extend or if you intend to have native cloud at a distributed data center, that's where edge cloud makes it a reality, and still your hyper-converged infrastructure is the bare metal landing zone for your edge cloud to be built. Last but not the least, if you intend to procure services exclusively coming from VMware Cloud Pod built either on AWS or Google or Azure, then hyperscaler service coming from a public cloud vendor can also be integrated. So this triangular journey that connects your data placements, your workload placements, and also to keep in mind it's been cost-centric, which is taken into extreme consideration, brings the reality of freedom of choice. You are free to choose, not delivered to what is made available. It's the flexibility what makes this exclusive and explicit in comparison to any other competition in the industry. It's the flexibility of your private on-prem infrastructure that you tend to build based on what exactly you need, the kind of variability, the amount of features that you just require, the amount of security that you might want to basically knit it down, ease of use with the management layer that cuts across the worlds, and the amount of accessibility that you require. All that you require is a tailor-made solution, and that's what we call it as a freedom of choice, bringing both the worlds together of private cloud and a public cloud. That brings me to the end of conversation. The pyramid that you see, it levels up your transformation and it lets you achieve your fueling towards hybrid cloud. It's because that as Dell Technologies, we as customers, you could be spoiled with choice, because the pyramid that we build on to fuel your data towards a cloud does not stop just between infrastructure, platform, and solution. It also extends. If you want to innovate your workload along with extrinsic storage capabilities, or if you want to intend to cover your data being protected from the data protection offerings that comes from Dell, and want to accelerate your workload today as we speak, we are on 15th generation PowerEdge servers, and sooner we intend to see the 16th generation computes as well. It accelerates the workload. Ultimately, our vision to the customer is that we want you to fuel your adoption towards your cloud with ease, that's the simplicity, agile, taking your workload into consideration and giving the control back to you so that you're independent of an infrastructure which is self-healing and self-management. Last but not the least, what do you want to decide on? It's a choice that you want to make. Thank you so much.